Thank you.
Sweet. The first order of business, we will do the roll call for the board members.
I'd like. Oh. Yeah.
What's this up at the top recording?
Oh, there it is. I voted on there.
Yeah, we're good. So I'll call for that.
Yeah, I was gonna call Supervisor Malik,
Hello.
Supervisor Galloway,
Present.
Councilor Pinkston,
Here.
Councilor Oshrin,
Here. Mr.
Nelson,
Present.
Miss Landry,
Here.
Miss Hubert. She's not there. Mr. Wood Hudson. Mr. Mike Murphy is not here. Miss Monteith said she won't be available today. Mr. Garland. Mr. Minor, Stephen. Mr. Kang. Miss Smedley, she's joining us today from CTAC. She's the new CTAC chair. And Miss Jacobs.
I'm sorry, could you spell your last name?
Present online.
Sarah Medley, Medley. Thank you.
Miss Jacobs, would you state the reason for joining the meeting online tonight?
I'm happy to, but I'm not a voting member because I'm working from home with a sick daughter and because Comcast internet is out, so I'm hotspotting in on my phone.
Thank you.
And when we get to the round table, we'll have a chance for staff to do that. And Christine, hold on. I'm just getting to your text. So Christine just mentioned that she apologized that she's not here in person, but is joining us to be able to listen. But the next item for us after attendance, we do have a staff update. I am happy and thrilled to be able to say that we were able to hire our new transportation director, which I believe puts the TJPDC at full staff, correct?
Yeah.
Which has not been the case for a while. So that's fantastic. Taylor Jenkins has joined us as our transportation director. And this is the first time we've met in person. We got a brief intro at the TJPDC meeting. But I'd like to give you a few minutes to just say hello and introduce yourself.
Yeah, of course. Thank you. I'm Taylor Jenkins. I'm originally from Richmond and I joined TJPDC last month. I think January 16th was my first day, but I came from Michael Baker International where I spent some time working on things like transit development plans, regional multimodal studies, even did some program management type of work for a little bit. But before that, I spent about 4 years with the state at the Virginia Department of Rail and Public Transportation. So that's where most people know me from. I see a lot of familiar faces in here. I did a lot of work with Smart Scale, which I know is a really significant part of what the MPO does as well. So really looking forward to working with all of you.
Thank you very much. And let's see, we don't need the participation policy. And that brings us to item number 2, matters. And I do know that Mr. Krebs would like to speak today. So if you'd like to come up, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Ned, Policy Board. My name is Peter Krebs. I'm from the Piedmont Environmental Council. I'm here to invite everybody in the room and visiting online to attend the 5th Annual Active Mobility Summit, which is happening next Thursday and Friday, so not tomorrow, but a week from Thursday and Friday at the Wool Factory. The Annual Mobility Alliance's meeting is an opportunity for different groups and different kinds of stakeholders to come together, form work teams around projects that nobody can accomplish alone. This year, we're incredibly excited that our theme is going to be the 3-Notch Trail. It'll be the unofficial kickoff of the 3-Notch Trail planning process. The 3-Notch Trail will be a multimodal bike pedestrian pathway from Charlottesville to the Afton Tunnel and beyond. So it's a project of really national significance, but also this process is going to tackle some pretty everyday type of problems that exist here in the MPO area, like how will people get to work? It'll be useful in that way as well. So the summit has a different format than usual. It's gonna take place, it's free, open to anybody. There's a Thursday night session on March 6th, which will be a sort of everybody learning the basics of the 3-notch trail, the process. Jessica's gonna give a good like intro about the project. We're gonna have Kat Anthony, who's the director of the Virginia Capitol Trail. She's gonna do a presentation. The Virginia Capitol Trail is sort of our inspiration. It connects Richmond to Jamestown and beyond, and has really changed both the urban fabric of Richmond, but also has changed the way the rural counties have thought about walking and biking. So that'll be a great, pretty interesting conversation. Plenty of food and fellowship. Then we're gonna reconvene on Friday morning back at the Wool Factory, and it's gonna be a little bit more intensive, like stakeholder work session-y type stuff. We're gonna have a panel that is going to also include Kat Anthony again, she'll be back, as well as Brantley Tyndall from the Fall Line Trail, which will connect Petersburg to Ashland and Richmond in between. Elliot Caldwell from the East Coast Greenway will be there, and also Dwayne Jones, who's doing amazing work connecting Waynesboro to the Afton Tunnel, and that's gonna really handshake with the 3-notch trail. Super exciting. Learn more at www.pcba.org/mobility summit. Flyers by the door. Thank you.
Thank you. And is there anyone else here in the room that would like to give public comment? Is there anyone online who wishes to give public comment? Then we will close matters from the public and go to item number 3. 3A is the review and acceptance of the agenda. Are there any changes to the agenda today? Is there a motion to adopt the agenda? Second. All right, motion's been made and seconded. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, and item 3B, the approval of the draft December 18, 2024 meeting minutes. Are there any changes or edits that need to be made to the minutes? Very short minutes.
I move for adoption of the minutes.
All right, motion's been made and seconded. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Awesome. And since this is the first meeting of 2025, we have we need to do the election of the officers for the MPO board. And the nominating committee, which was myself, Mr. Nelson, and Ms. Monteith, met. Did we meet? We met last Thursday. Yeah, it's like, oh, it was that day, 1 p.m. And had conversations about how it would go this year. I also had conversations with Mr. Pinkston and Ms. Oshrin, Ms. Malik. Typically, it's not in the bylaws, but typically we have swapped city to county in terms of leadership year in and year out. This year, and it's not required to do that, but it seemed that this year there might be interest and to have it continue with the county as the leadership for the chair role this year, and then vice chair from the city. So the nominating committee was prepared to have myself continue as chair, and Ms. Oshrin would be the vice chair nominee. So if there's any questions about that or any objections to that. But
I want to say thank you for being willing to remain in the role as chair. Though it's one more thing on top of your to-do list, which is why I didn't feel like managing right now. But the city's grateful for your continued leadership, and I'd be happy to move. That's what we've got questions.
yeah, I think we're ready. Yeah, just nominate the whole slate.
Yeah, I would nominate the slate. Yeah, okay.
And the slate is Ben Galloway as chair, Natalie Oshrin as vice chair. And all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? Great. Happy to do it. So that will take us to item 4. Oh, we're caught up. new business, the first item, 4A, the fiscal year 26 Unified Planning Work Program Update. Ms. Jenkins, this will be you're handling this one?
Yes, I
The
am.
first one, now you get.
Sarah is going to share her screen. Just give us 1 second.
Before you get started, I really want to thank you for putting a list of acronyms in and asking my name. That was very
Yes,
helpful.
that was a change that I put in there. I'm glad you noticed. All right. Is it large enough? Or is there a way maybe we can change? Is that better?
Maybe drive your room to the side. I hope so.
I'm sorry, we couldn't make it bigger. Okay, let's see how they look. Go ahead and go to the next slide. All right, and so this was also in your agenda packet, so you all can review the document itself and see the slides. I know this is a little small, I apologize. But the background of the UPWP, it really guides the work that MPO staff will be doing for the next fiscal year. So it identifies all of the transportation planning activities that we would ideally work on next year. It serves as our budget and our work plan, and it also identifies the regional priorities and deliverables that you all would want to see as well. Next slide. Federal law requires that we address specific planning factors in the metropolitan planning process, and so those are in the UPWP, and I also put them up here in the presentation as well. And those include factors such as safety, security, maintenance, travel and tourism as well. The last LRTP update was done in fiscal year 24, and so we recommend bringing the UPWP in line with the vision and the priorities that were identified in that plan. As part of the long-range transportation plan process, there was a lot of public engagement that was done for that, and so this is a shared vision that we know the community has, as well as MPO staff and everyone who is on the MPO as well. And so we recommend those blue ones that you see on there, which are equity, quality of life, climate action, and land use. We recommend including those in next year's UPWP update to also guide the work alongside those federally required planning factors as well. UPWP is mostly funded from federal sources, so 80% federal, 10% of it is local funding, and 10% is state funding. The two federal agencies that primarily fund the UPWP are the Federal Highway Administration and FTA. And so the federal highway dollars come through VDOT, through PL funds, and the FTA funds are administered by DRPT. Right, I know this is a little hard to see, but this table identifies funding by source. So it specifically calls out how much we have from each of the funding sources. And so the ones that are in red, they're in red because we don't have those final numbers yet. We will get those probably in April. So those will be reflected in the updated document that you all see for adoption. This table identifies funding by task. And so you see the specific buckets, how much we have allocated to each of the different tasks in the UPWP. And so this year we did increase a bit of the program administration budget, which there's a bullet on the next slide about that. But historically, I've been told that we have underestimated how much time and commitment and resources it takes specifically to do things like staff committees. We didn't explicitly call out in past UPWPs things like laptop replacements, eligible expenses that do fall under admin. And we wanted to make sure that we could accommodate and capture all of those in the future to avoid any sort of transfers that we might have to do because we under budgeted for that. Task 2 is long-range transportation planning. So that's any of the long-range plans you would think of. And we do have a line item budget that we will show with those. And then task 3 are any short-range activities, including specific technical assistance to localities. Some of the administrative changes. So for this UPWP, we removed the line item budgets for the subtask in the UPWP itself. And so we did this to align with similar practices of other MPOs and reduce the administrative burden that's on staff anytime we would have to do an amendment to the UPWP if there was a percentage increase over a certain amount. There will still be a line item budget that's maintained internally for staff to make sure that we are still hitting those ballpark areas where we want to hit for all of the work, and you all will see those line item budgets in this presentation as well. And just a couple naming changes. We wanted to call those out as well. We just tweaked some of the language. So administration became program administration. Long-range transportation planning was the same. And short-range planning became short-range transportation planning and local, state, and federal agency assistance. And part of these changes were also to make it easier for staff. Like when we are allocating our time to specific projects, it should be very clear. We should be able to pull this up and you should see, here's where this should fall, here's where I should build this work. Et cetera, and this will help us do that. All right, so these are the line item budgets specifically for the items that we hope to do in the next UPWP. So for task 1, program administration, on one side, on the left side of the screen, that is the PL fund budget, and then on the right side of the screen, that is the FTA budget. And so things that fall under administration include reporting, invoicing, staffing committees, and we specifically call out all of those committees in the document itself. Public outreach, public participation in Title VI, that specifically is just to update those documents. And so if there is public engagement that has to happen as part of a plan, a study, or anything like that, that would go in whichever task that project would actually fall under. We added this in here just to make sure if we had to update our Title VI plan, if we had to update the public participation plan, that there is a place to capture that under administration. And then information sharing and professional development. That is where our staff would attend those monthly and quarterly meetings put on by VDOT, OIP, the CTB, just to make sure our staff stays up to date and we can share that information back with the MPO as well. Task 2 for long-range transportation planning includes the comprehensive safety action plan that the PDC is currently working on. That has a mid-fiscal year 26 completion, and so we made sure to include that for next year for staff to continue to be able to work on that. The travel demand model update is also in there. We are currently updating that right now. That's a project that will carry over. The travel demand management study is something that was in the previous one that will also carry over. The Coordinated Human Services Mobility Plan update is something that is new for this UPWP that the state is currently about to kick off an update for that plan. And we don't have a full scope of what our involvement would look like, but since we are a grant recipient from DRPT for their mobility management program, we would have some sort of role. Maybe that's, stakeholder involvement, maybe a survey we might have to fill out, but our staff might be involved with that plan. And then the next one is long-range transportation plan. If anything would have to be amended in the LRTP, that would be captured under this task. And finally, task 3, short-range transportation planning, is where we include all of that day-to-day work that we would do. And so smart scale support, technical assistance, participating in STAR studies, project pipeline studies, and other grant planning and support. TDM work, transit and rail planning, human service planning, bike ped support would also fall under this task. If we have to update, we have to do the annual performance target updates every single year. That work would fall under here. And then we have a bucket for any special studies, projects, programs, contingency that might come up. And so we know that if our partners are working on a special study that we might not know about at the time, that could be captured under this, if any of those come up. So those were the highlights of what's in the fiscal year 26 UPWP. As far as next steps and the timeline, you all were provided with the initial draft and we went through it today, and we would anticipate adoption at the April meeting. And so you all have a bit of time to go through, review the document, and get us any feedback that you have. We're also happy to take any immediate questions if you all have any today as well. Yeah.
For the federal funding situation, since 80% comes from the feds, how much of that is in danger?
Yeah, that's a really great question. It's It's one that a lot of people have asked, and Christine and I have been joining.
Well, I guess like how much of that is, I guess, allocated or promised in a way that is spoken for and harder to mess with than the stuff
Yeah.
that's easier to mess with.
Can I respond? It is formula-based funding, so it's not discretionary grant funding, so I think it would be on a lower tier as far as that concerned. I think the discretionary grant funding is probably.
It's
targeted
written
right now.
into the,
But with all the changes, I mean, anything's on the table right now.
transportation.
Right, I get that everything is potentially.
Yeah.
It's written into our-
But yeah, discretionary versus formula
Formula.
is, okay, that's helpful, thank you.
Thank you, Sandy.
And then if you can hear me, this is Christine. We've also gotten communication from USDOT that is clarifying some communications that have been going around, that in every transition of leadership, there's going to be a review of all documentation. They have specifically noted that there is no pause in our funding right now, but there is a comprehensive review of all documentation. So that's STIPs, TIPs, state planning research work programs, unified planning work programs, long-range transportation plans. So those are all currently under review, but we have been told that the funding at this point is not being considered. With that said, everything I think right now is wait and see.
The big grain of salt, yeah, thank you.
I have a comment. I saw that you included those 4 framework factors from the long range transportation plan into this work plan. And 2 of them are like big buzzwords that are getting flagged in all federal programs, equity and climate. And I was wondering if there was plans to adjust the language, maybe
Right.
keep the values, adjust the language.
Right, and I'll let Christine probably chime in on this.
Yep, I'm happy to take that one as well.
Yeah.
I have directed my staff that we should continue with business as usual and not preemptively sanitize any of our documentation until we are directed to do so. And so since this was a priority of the community through the planning processes that we've gone through, we are recommending continuing to include it. With that said, if we get something that states that we must make changes or risk losing our federal funding, we will have to make that decision when we get there. And that could come in the form of amending language and documents. I'm not sure exactly what that would look like, but I think for now, we're just trying to align what we have been told the priorities are here locally, which is what we're tasked to do in a long-range transportation plan.
Any comments, questions?
What kind of feedback would you like from us?
We really want to know, are these the regional priorities? And so when you all go through and you look at the specific tasks and what's captured under them, especially task 2 and task 3, almost just confirmation, yes, these are important things for us to be doing work for and to be working on. Yeah.
Okay, any others? And this is just acceptance of the draft, so we don't need any motions or action.
No.
Very good.
No.
When will we vote on it?
At the April 15th meeting. Oh, is it the 20? Thank you, the 23rd.
I would also add, from you all's perspective, certainly what I have, directed my team to do is what we're doing broadly at the TJPDC. But since you are, as the planning organization, you have decision-making authority. If you want to guide me or direct me to do something different with how we're approaching the language in our documentation, I certainly would receive that feedback from you all.
Does anybody disagree with what Christine was talking about earlier or object? I certainly don't.
No, I don't disagree. I think what you said makes sense. Thank you for that.
Very good. Then we will move to 4B, which is the Title VI implementation plan update.
So because we receive federal funding, we have to comply with the Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. The way that we do this is we create a implementation plan. It's kind of a plan of how we will not discriminate against people of color or foreign origin or who speak a foreign language. In December of 2022, we updated the Title VI implementation plan and this body approved it. That was the update was based on VDOT's requirements for Title VI, and it was a pretty extensive update. Because we also receive federal funding through the Department of Rail and Public Transportation. We also have to go through an audit with them and comply with their specifications of how they want to see the plan updated. So they had some requirements that were not in the VDOT plan. And we added those requirements as appendices, and it's appendices F through M. It's in the memo, and you can see the appendices also in your packet. And so we need to ask the policy board to reapprove the plan with the amendments that were made to it. I don't know if you want me to read out the amendment, like the appendices that were added. It's pretty mild. There's nothing really, there's no big changes or anything. Yes. Yeah.
Questions or? And this one is an action item.
Yes. Oh, and so the MPO Tech Committee reviewed it and made a recommendation for you to approve and verify the plan.
So you need a motion to
Adopt.
adopt Title VI implementation plan update, including the appropriate amendments or relevant amendments.
Yeah.
Appendices. Appendices or amendments?
Appendices.
Motion has been made and seconded. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? Very good.
Thank you.
That will take us to number 5, Innovation and Technology Transportation Fund. And we have Dr. Fontaine with us today.
Thank you.
Sarah, you're
Welcome, pulling that up. Thank you. I appreciate the invitation to come today. My name is Mike Fontaine. I'm the Associate Director for Safety Operations and Traffic Engineering at the Virginia Transportation Research Council, which is the VDOT Research Division. We're located on grounds at UVA, so we are here locally. So, Sarah, should I just tell you when to advance? Or?
Yeah, I was told to do the PowerPoint one instead of this, so just give me a minute.
Okay. While we're pulling the PowerPoint up,
I have it.
So while we're pulling the PowerPoint up, what I'm going to be talking about today is a project that VDOT has going on investigating what's called a smart intersection technology. We're currently in the second phase of that project where we're getting ready to do some deployments here in Albemarle County.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
No worries.
I was gonna say you are Gorian's guest, and unfortunately he's not able to join us.
Keep that slideshow.
So I was gonna.
Okay, perfect. All right. If you
But
can,
it's still there.
there we go. Can you go one more, please?
Oh,
There we go.
Yeah, there's always a little lag. Keep going one more, Sarah. So I probably don't have to tell anyone in this audience that intersections are often a critical point in our network in terms of highway safety, especially for bicyclists and pedestrians. When we look at the data that we have in Virginia, what we see is over 25% fatalities and over a third of all serious injuries at intersections, and those numbers are even higher for bicyclists and pedestrians. So this is an emphasis area in our state strategic highway safety plan to focus on these, particularly these vulnerable road user crashes are a significant concern because we've seen upward trend, but especially post-pandemic in crashes with these with bikes and pedestrians. So go to the next one, please. So I'm talking about smart intersections today. What is a smart intersection? So what we've seen in the last 5 to 10 years is there's been tremendous leaps forward in the technology that we use to detect traffic at intersections. Essentially, there's been large innovations in the use of LiDAR and the use of machine vision as well as radar, where rather than just detecting whether something is stopped waiting to at the intersection or not, we can actually track trajectories of vehicles as they traverse the intersection. And so what this does is this new technology kind of opens up a lot of opportunities for us, where instead of waiting for a crash to occur, this allows us to look at near misses that are happening in the vicinity of the intersection. So rather than being a reactive mode where we're waiting for a crash to occur and then trying to figure out how to fix the problem, we can look at, are there unsafe behaviors happening at an intersection and try and either change how the signal operates or make other changes to try and address those problems before something bad happens. There's also opportunities with these technologies to interact with the traffic signal controller to try and improve the operational safety of the intersection. So if you can foresee a case where a vehicle is approaching an intersection on a red light at a speed that is obviously way too fast for them to stop at the red light, we could potentially hold an all red phase longer so that cars aren't going into the intersection while this person is getting ready to run the red light and get hit. And then thinking a little bit further out, as we move into a world where our infrastructure and vehicles are more connected in the future, we have opportunities to warn the vehicle itself directly if we detect something happening in the intersection. If there's a pedestrian in the crosswalk, a car looks like it's going to enter the crosswalk while that pedestrian's there, we could potentially push a alert in vehicle to that car to alert them of that dangerous situation. Technology isn't there yet, but it's hopefully on the horizon, but it gives us some of these capabilities. So the next slide, please. There's a program that's been established by the General Assembly called the Innovation and Technology Transportation Fund, ITTF, that basically provides dedicated funds to test these high technology kind of pilot programs. And it has to meet one of these 5 emphasis areas that I've got on the slide. And back in 2022, we received $1 million to perform a pilot test of these smart intersections in order to really see whether this has the potential to help us out from a safety and mobility perspective. Next slide, please. So we've conducted this in 2 phases. Our first phase, which went from 2023 till September of last year, we did a technology scan, found 4 promising vendors. We deployed them on 2 intersections up in Fairfax County, where these 4 systems were all deployed on the same 2 intersections in parallel. So we could look side by side, how do they perform? How do they handle being up there out in the elements for a prolonged period of time? And are they going to hold up? And we looked at how well did they work? Then from that, we're taking the most promising technologies and then we're expanding the deployment to look at other use cases around the state to see how well this functions in a broader variety of situations. So we're getting ready to do 4 deployments down in the VDOT Salem district, as well as 4 in the Culpeper district, specifically all in Albemarle County. And so we've been working with the Virginia Tech Transportation Institute to do this work. VTTI is a major university partner for us in a lot of technology projects. They've got a large staff that does a lot of technology integration work for us. And so they've been very instrumental in us deploying this program. So we go to the next slide. So I do want to talk about what happened in phase 1, because that gives you context for what we're going to be doing here in Albemarle County. So we deployed at Route 29 in Nutley and Route 50 in Nutley in Fairfax County. We looked at one system that used LiDAR, so essentially create a point cloud of everybody traversing through the intersection from the LiDAR. That cost about $36,000 per intersection to deploy that system. We tested 2 machine vision systems where they were camera-based and used video image processing to track these trajectories. And then we looked at one system that used a combination of radar and video in order to do this detection. And so we initially looked at, well, okay, could it accurately detect traffic and bicyclists and pedestrians and all the users of the intersection? And then was it able to accurately identify safety critical events? That's what we wanted to see here. Could this is the value add for this over our traditional detection systems? And we had an independent data collection system there that we collected data so we could look against ground truth video and say, okay, did this work the way it was supposed to when we were doing the testing? So next slide, please. So we went out to all the sites. We did a lot of work with our local Northern Virginia district folks to try and figure out where to put the equipment on these mast arms. One of the challenges often is just finding physical place on the poles to put all this additional detection equipment. You can kind of see the sensor array we ended up with at the end when we had 4 systems all out there. This is not what the Albemarle County systems will look like, because this is 4 systems, not 1 system. And so they were all deployed there with the vendor to make sure that we were getting the best possible operation. So we can, next slide, please. And so they were calibrated. So the top one kind of shows what it looks like with the LiDAR based system, where they were sort of setting up the detection for the point cloud. The bottom left side, some of them were using fisheye cameras, where they basically had that kind of video view and then decomposed it to track vehicles through the intersection. And then we set up these independent video collection devices so that we could sort of validate what the vendor systems were giving us. Next slide, please. All right, so let's look at what these systems actually are doing here. So if you just tap the button, it should advance the video. So one of the things that it can do is it will automatically detect when a crash has happened at the intersection. So this is a case where the vehicle is turning left here, someone has run the red light and struck the vehicle. So you can foresee a case where if we have a system like this, perhaps this helps us with emergency response. If there's a way to detect a crash in real time, maybe emergency response could be alerted, send someone to the scene a little bit faster than relying on a 911 call. So we do have an opportunity to get things like that. We also know we have a lot of unreported crashes. Fender benders happen all the time. We never know what happens, you know, because a police report is never filed. And so this gives us some additional data looking at things like that. Next slide, please. Another interesting case is it can actually detect wrong way drivers. This is a case where there's a median on one approach. There's a driveway that you'll see on the left side of the screen. If you hit the button again, Sarah. This person at 9:30 at night, not at 2 a.m., decided to go the wrong way down the road because they didn't want to go down to the next light and pull a U-turn to go into the shopping center, and went into oncoming traffic. So, you know, this happens far more often than we would expect based off of what we've seen at these intersections. It was rather surprising to see something like this. Go to the next one. This is where I think we start to see some real power here. So this starts to get into our near miss detection situation. So if you want to hit the button, Sarah. Oh, go back up one. Sorry. Can you go back back a slide? Sorry, you're jumping ahead on me here. Okay, yeah. Now just hit the button once and okay. Click on the video, maybe.
This is the video.
Yeah. Okay, so this is a case you're going to see a vehicle come out of the right side of the screen. It's going to take that turn at a high rate of speed, not yield. You can see how close of a call that was with the vehicle that was coming through. And that's something that we would never pick up on our crash reports. This is something that luckily nothing happened. You know, the person behind was able to slow down enough not to strike that person, but it does give us an indication of unsafe behaviors that are happening at the location. All right, we can go to the next one now. And then this is one that I am not going to advocate this at all, but you'll see this pedestrian decides to basically play Frogger across the, and you watch this red pickup truck, watch how far the nose of that truck comes down in order to brake and avoid hitting that pedestrian. And so it's worth noting that at this intersection, this is the one leg of the intersection with no marked crosswalk. And so not to condone what this pedestrian did to cross here in a very dangerous way, but it does kind of show you the pedestrians are taking the shortest path to get to their desired endpoint, whether we've indicated that crosswalk is there and safe to cross or not. But obviously what he did here is not something that is safe, but this again, something we never know about through crash report data, because thankfully a tragedy did not happen here. All right, so we go to the next slide. So one of the things that this allows us to do is we can look at all these near miss events and we can start to look at a heat map of where are these problems happening at the intersection, as well as what time of day are they happening. So this gives us some analytical tools where we can say, okay, you know, that turn where we saw the one vehicle take the high rate of speed, it looks like we've got maybe a high radius of curvature there where someone can make that movement very quickly. Maybe that encourages them to do that. Maybe there's a design intervention to reduce those near misses if we viewed that. We can also look at by time of day where we have problems. And so just to be clear that this technology is a safety and mobility analytical tool. It is not an enforcement tool. It's not like we can write tickets off this, right? So we can get a time of day map. Maybe this gives us information we can share with our law enforcement partners where they can figure out when to go out and do enforcement, you know, based off of this kind of data as well. Yeah, question.
Just a quick question about the graph on the right. Do the colors mean anything?
Yeah, so in this case, it's red is bad, green is less bad. I guess I shouldn't say good. So it's basically the intensity of the number of near misses that we have at this intersection. So dark red is basically where we're seeing the most near misses.
On the right, sorry, the graph.
Oh, on the right,
Yeah.
so this is a count of the number of near misses we saw over the course of a year by hour of the day. So if we were to look at this, we would say at 5 p.m. we had about 900 near miss events between 5 and 6 p.m. at this intersection, across the entire intersection. You can break it down by looking at movements and stuff like that too.
And so that's over the course of a year,
Yes, this is over the course of a year at one of our intersections.
but the colors are just to
Colors are just to differentiate by hour of the day. The colors don't mean anything. Sorry, I
Thank you.
misunderstood your question.
No, it's all right.
first.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Appreciate
Thank you. All right, next one. All right, so what we want to do is, this is fundamentally a technology evaluation. We're trying to see whether these systems work. And so what we discovered was that, we kind of randomly selected 2 weeks of data throughout the year that we deployed. We tried to look at a range of light conditions, day versus night, as well as weather conditions, rain, snow, clear, things like that, to see how well they performed. And what we found was the LiDAR system really fell apart when we had inclement weather. The ability for that scanning LiDAR to create a good point cloud did not work well when we had a lot of rain in the air. And you'll notice that I do not name any vendors here. I don't want to give the impression VDOT is endorsing or not endorsing a particular vendor. That's intentional. The radar system actually also performed very badly because it couldn't maintain a consistent lock on a vehicle or a bicycle or pedestrian as it traversed the intersection. So it massively overcounted the amount of users that we had there. So the two video-based systems seem to work the best for us. We tended to see that the ability to detect vehicles was pretty good. The ability to detect bicycles and pedestrians wasn't as good as for vehicles, but it still was better than what we have now in terms of counts of bicycles and pedestrians, which is almost nothing, right? So this gives us some measure of exposure and usage of the intersection that we don't have today. Next slide, please. So we also looked at how well was this able to identify these near miss events. And so we looked at this from a couple of perspectives. We said, okay, using their numerical criteria that they use, like how close do I have to physically come to a crash? Was it detecting things appropriately? And then we also looked at it more subjectively. We have cases, I probably had a case like this today walking to the meeting. I was on the downtown mall, walking across one of the vehicle crossings. The vehicle was going very slowly through. He was past me. I started walking behind the vehicle as it passed me. Distance-wise, I was very close to that vehicle, but there was no danger of me being struck. That might get flagged by an automated system, but it really isn't a safety concern. And so what we see is that while the systems generally work pretty well from a numerical method at identifying these near misses, not every near miss that's identified is really a safety problem. So there's still, it's a diagnostic tool that an engineer can use to look at the data and try and see, okay, is this really a safety problem? The one thing I will point out, the thing where it failed the most was wrong way detection. And the thing that caused it the most problems is if you had a car carrier with a bunch of cars on it, some of the cars were facing backwards, or someone towing a vehicle and it was facing backwards, it would count that as a wrong way vehicle. It couldn't tell whether it was in tow or whether it was actually driving. So that was one where we saw some of the deficiencies in the system. All right, we go to the next one, please. All right, so moving on to phase two. This is where we're taking our most promising systems from the first phase. We're trying to broaden out the deployment, and really we're trying to stress test these systems and put them in more challenging situations to see how well they work, as well as expose them to the elements for a longer period of time to see if they're going to be having maintenance problems or what the upkeep is going to be like on the systems. So we're going to be doing 4 deployments in Montgomery County. Probably the most interesting of these is we're actually deploying one at Beamer and Southgate right outside Lane Stadium, which will be a very interesting data collection for us to look at behaviors of both bicycles, pedestrians, and road users. And then we're going to be doing 4 sites in Albemarle County. So we've been working with Culpeper District to try and identify locations. It's a combination of looking at locations where we have pedestrian and bicyclist usage, but we also have space in our controller cabinets to house all this additional equipment. So what we've settled on is we're looking at Alderman McCormick at UVA. This is just down the hill from my office, and This will be a very interesting case because any type of mode of transportation you can think of is used at this intersection by the students. I saw someone on a motorized monowheel the other day, which was a new one for me. But so if we can work there, I think that'll be interesting, as well as some of the behaviors the students have at that intersection. We're looking at hydraulic and Lambs Road right by Albemarle High School. This will be interesting, I think, partially because the county has installed a speed camera at that location. I guess gives us potentially some insights into what's happening with behavior there with that. We're looking at Ivy and Old Ivy. This is probably the one that's most likely to change. Right now, the Culpeper District Structure and Bridge is reviewing the structural design of the mast to make sure it can handle the additional equipment. There's already a lot of equipment out there. We may or may not be able to do this one, but if we do it, I think it's going to be interesting because of the geometry caused by that car wash there, as well as the pedestrian traffic we see coming down Old Ivy Road underneath that narrow railroad bridge. And then we're looking at Route 29, the Rio overpass. And this is interesting just because of how big that intersection is. It's so expansive. Can we detect reliably with a piece of equipment when the intersection is that large and there's so much space for a pedestrian to cross there? So we got the next one. So basically what we're going to be doing with this evaluation is, again, this is a technology evaluation, not a site evaluation. So I guess I do want to emphasize that. We're looking at, does the technology work? We're not using this to diagnose safety issues or anything at these intersections. Now, that being said, the data that's being generated is going to be shared with Culpeper District. They're going to be aware of everything that they're seeing. And so that is going to be happening. So, we're again going to be looking at detection accuracy, the accuracy of the safety critical events. One thing that's new is we're going to be looking at what's the ability of these systems to interact with our traffic signal controllers. So some of these functions that we've talked about before, like, can I hold the all red a little bit longer if it looks like someone's going to run the red light? Could I hold a red phase if I've got a slow moving pedestrian in a crosswalk? We're going to test that functionality essentially in an offline mode. So these signals are going to continue to operate using the traditional detection and control that we've got out there. We're going to run this in parallel to see how it's going to work before we would ever turn anything out for public use. And then overlaying all this, all the VDOT folks know that cybersecurity kind of overlays everything that we do. Sean laughs. And so we've been having a lot of discussions with our operations technology division, because obviously anything that could compromise the integrity of the traffic signal system to operate safely is a primary concern. We want to make sure that what we deploy out there is going to pass muster from a cybersecurity perspective. And so that's going to be a critical part of the evaluation as well. Next one. And so in terms of schedule, basically where we're at right now is we're in procurement and we're going to be moving into installation. We hope to have everything up and installed by June of this year. Then we'll be collecting data and assessing the system through January 2026. Trying to summarize our findings, and then assuming the systems work well, right now the systems are kind of purchased and installed by Virginia Tech, and then there'll be a transition over to VDOT at the end of that process. And so working with Virginia Tech has been good for us from a procurement perspective because universities have a much easier procurement pathway than state agencies do, and so that has been a good pathway for us to getting this technology out there. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you. Yes.
So you mentioned the cybersecurity of it all. How long are the videos stored? Who has access to them?
So right now, all the videos are stored on the cloud by the vendor. That's one of the aspects of the cybersecurity assessment that we're looking at. It's all behind. You have to have a login in order to get in and access all that. That's one of the things that we're looking at because VDOT has a policy not to store video because of the FOIA implications of stored video, where if we had recorded our video, we would be constantly inundated with FOIA requests from lawyers investigating traffic accidents. And so that's one of the aspects of this is that we're looking at is to what degree can we take this and get the good information from it without exposing that sort of administrative burden that storing that video might have for us.
And is that VDOT policy like an SOP or like a law?
Sean, I'm not sure.
I don't think
It's not.
It's not a law, yeah.
It's not a law, but we don't record anything.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. And, oh, go ahead.
So just following up with that, even if there's no identifier, no license plate, no anything else, we still feel the same concern about having something for research purposes.
Well, so we have an exception for research purposes. Now, if we start rolling this into production, then that's where everything starts to become a question of how we do it. Because the thing is, if you have a timestamp in a location, even if there's no license plate legible or something like that, they'll just give you a FOIA request for give me everything at this intersection between this time and this time, and someone would have to pull it.
And I think that's an important piece. This is research.
Yeah.
If I in the district right now wanted to go out and procure this to do it on the same intersection he's trying to do it on, no.
Yeah, and so I think this is a good point where we're testing the video-based system in Albemarle County. In Montgomery County, we're testing there's a different radar-based system that we found that appears promising that we didn't test in phase 1. The advantage of that is there's no video trail to it. We're just looking at paths. And so there's no video that someone could do a Freedom of Information Act request on. So that might, dictate an ultimate decision on what technology platform is used if this proves to be successful and rolled out broadly. But that's definitely going to be a consideration of all this.
I guess this is probably pushing the limits and I guess applicable to the executive order 30 also, isn't it? Which is, I guess, the artificial intelligence, state agencies use of artificial intelligence.
So
Use of artificial.
this is kind of a, so again, we have research exemptions to that order. Now, I think one of the challenges we've got is that the vendors that we see like to throw the AI label on everything, whether it's AI or not, because it's sort of the sexy buzzword of the day. And so, machine learning, image analytics, stuff that we've literally been doing for 25 years has been rebranded in a way that has created a lot of scrutiny that we didn't used to have when we were doing essentially, very similar things. So you'll notice I did not use the letters AI anywhere in this presentation.
Sometimes it's just technology.
Yeah, I mean, so I think a lot of this stuff is really machine learning, and machine learning is like classification, and it's not like we're talking about generative AI or anything like that here, so. Yep. Sorry.
So I appreciate that you said the parameters for this evaluation is for technology, not to evaluate the siting of the intersections. When does site evaluation come into play? When is that something would that be a subsequent study using the same data? Would it be?
Well, I think first we have to establish the validity of this data is kind of where we're at, is do we trust the information that's coming out of these systems sufficiently to use it for deciding to program improvements and make decisions? So I think that's the first thing that we have to establish. Now, that being said, we've been working very closely with the traffic operations folks in Culpeper District on this, and they've been very intimately involved in all this, and they have access to all the dashboards and everything as things go up. So I'm expecting that if they see things that are concerning as this project progresses, they're going to move to immediately address them. Sean's nodding his head, and I know there's a lot of good folks there, and I know they're going to do their due diligence as they see this come forward. Now, that being said, like I said, just like with the wrong way detection. Okay, yeah, it looks like this is working pretty good. Well, you dig below the surface a little bit. It's like, well, maybe we can't trust like these initial numbers that it gave us. We got to do. It still requires an engineer to kind of look at the data and assess it. And is this really telling us what the system thinks it's telling us? So I'm not sure I can really give you a firm answer on when we would move to that. A lot of it is we got to make sure we trust the data before we start, spending money to address concerns that are identified by the data until we've established that trust. Yeah, good question.
I guess a major concern that I see and citizens complain to me about is the general lawlessness of fellow drivers. People stay home in the snow because they could do fine, but some idiot was going to run into them going 50 when they should be going 10. So what you're going to learn about these behaviors from a distance will be helpful, because at least from an educational point of view, somebody ought to be able to figure out how to help the public understand that they're not the only people out there. And, for whether it's and I expect that adult drivers are just as bad or worse than teenagers, because teenagers can lose their driving privileges if their parents get mad, whereas grown-ups don't have any.
Yeah. The AAA actually does surveys annually. I think they still do them annually, where they ask people basically rate your driving performance relative to your peers. And everybody, it's something like 80% of people think they're above average driver. And, so that's just, mathematically not possible, right? That 80% is above average. And what they find is basically the only group that says that they drive about as good as their peers is when you start to get like in 65 up. People start having a little bit more realistic assessment of their driving compared to their peers, but there's still people that grossly overestimate how good of a driver they are. It's always everybody else is the problem, not me, kind of thing. So, that's the one thing, we certainly have constraints on what we can do with the video and using that as a system, but video is a powerful tool, and one thing I'll say is that, so we're doing this on the VDOT system. And, when we did our Fairfax deployment, City of Falls Church actually saw some of this data and they got very excited about it. And so they're actually deploying a video-based system on their city system using city funds to do that. And so they've got a different policy with regard to video retention than the state has. And so that gives them different opportunities. So there's different tools available. And a lot of it depends on, city might be able to do something different than what we can do in VDOT. So there's different tools out there that have different pros and cons.
So the data will be shared with the Culpeper district. Do you have any intent on sharing some of that with transportation staff?
Yeah, I mean, it would come up if we notice issues, like we've got a normal routine meeting with Albemarle County. If there's an issue that we've seen come up, we would definitely report on it.
Yes, 2 of those sites have corridor studies or pipeline studies.
Yep. Yep.
I've kind of it might be a broader question. It might be for Sean, it might be for both of you together, but this is a new technology. So moving forward, when we're designing intersections, it's something that we could include in the initial design for the intersection. And so I'm just wondering what your thoughts are on how this could affect intersection design and what the studies would look like to compare it. Like right now, we're comparing it to existing conditions, not a new blank thing that we're starting with. So we have like a roundabout first policy. Is this gonna threaten that? Because now there's technology that could overcome the safeties that you get from, like, this is totally predictive and like your thoughts on what maybe this could, how this could affect future design of roads and intersections.
I'll take a stab because I think it will help inform us of patterns to help us mitigate with our design. So I don't necessarily think it's gonna make us, we're not gonna use this data to say a roundabout's not good here. I mean, I think we're gonna learn what we've learned from these areas, and specifically in areas like Old Ivy. We're gonna have to, if we implement something out there now to collect information, we would use that information to help us design the best intersection based on the habits that we saw from the data that was collected. That makes sense. I don't see this being a big change for us.
I mean, I guess I would agree with what Sean said. I guess the one thing I'd maybe add on to that is right now, like if we're talking about a blank slate, brand new design, where we don't have the advantage of going out and collecting data on current behaviors and trying to figure out how to mitigate that. Right now, there's the science of safety has evolved tremendously in the last 15 years, where it's become much more mathematically and statistically rigorous. And so we know a lot now about how different design features impact crash likelihood. But still, we're fundamentally, handcuffed by using crash data. It relies on a crash happening. It relies on someone calling the police to get a crash report in the system that we can document. And that crash has to exceed the dollar threshold for it to be a reportable crash. And so when we look at like the crashes that we know about versus what State Farm or an insurance company knows about, they're vastly different sometimes. And so I think this will give us a much more complete view where if you have enough of this data in enough places, you know, maybe you can start to look at these behavioral trends and tie it to geometric features. But we're a long way from that happening. We would have to have, you know, really systematic use of something like this to have enough data out there where we could start to draw those relationships. But I think Sean's right on. I mean, for right now, I think it's a refinement tool more than a replacement. Yeah, we still know roundabouts have tremendous safety benefits. And, you know, I think a signalized intersection is almost always going to, in many situations, a roundabout works well, the signalized intersection is not going to be able to approach that from a safety perspective.
Okay, thank you.
The video of the car speeding through the turn lane was similar to what I think I took away from an analysis of the Albemarle High School intersection, where there was a suggestion to bump out the curb to narrow the Greenbrier to northbound hydraulic intersection to keep people from creeping around the corner, which so many people do now because there's a right turn lane, you know, they're available. So this is fascinating. I hope that you learn lots of good things. And we don't run over anybody.
We're walking out into traffic.
Yeah, well, that is hard.
Very good. Any other questions or comments? Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
That will take us to item 6. So we have 3 different updates. The first, safe streets and roads for all, is going online.
No, going on
he's
is
not
out
here.
today.
I'll do it for him.
Okay.
I'm gonna give the update for Gorian. He's able to join us today on our Move Safely Blue Ridge, which is the Safe Streets and Roads for All region's safety plan to reduce roadway safety and serious injuries for all road users. The first item is the City of Charlottesville Safety Demonstration Project. And yesterday, the Charlottesville community members were invited to review and provide ideas or thoughts on 3 proposed roadway design to improve safety around the intersection of East High Street, Meade Avenue, and Stewart Street. This implementation project demonstration is important because it allows the city and the project team to see which of the 3 proposed option roadway design that we are suggested would have the most safety impact for the residents that live and work and play in this community. So 3 different scenarios were presented yesterday at the public meeting at the Burley Moran Elementary School in Charlottesville. It was amazing for me to see and to hear how residents were thanking the team for having them take part in such an important effort on safety. We had a great turnout and very meaningful discussions. And I would welcome anyone who was present yesterday in this very room who would like to say something on that or share their thoughts on what happened yesterday to do so with the board. It's okay if there is not. Many people here were there yesterday. The second item on the moves, yeah, I don't know. Just if you want, I don't know.
Who was there?
Yeah, there was good turnout. I guess. Yeah, the room was full. There was a lot of chatter. People, I think it helps for people to have someone to talk to, because I live in this neighborhood. My house is actually in the photos on the survey. And so I had some neighbors who had texted me a couple of weeks ago saying, how do I even read this survey? And I was like, well, come to the event and someone will walk you through it, because it's good to have, there was like a person at each board to say, okay, this is what this means, this is how this works. The 3 different options had, I mean, we all know this intersection situation, and 2 of them added a bike lane to the Stewart to East High section of Meade, but the road itself became 1-way in different directions. And then the third kept it 2-way. But what all of them did and what I really appreciated was at the top of Mead, where it meets East High, had a big bump out to decrease the space that a pedestrian would need to walk to cross there. And also prevent kind of what we were talking about earlier with just people taking a turn because it's easy to make that turn. This whole road is basically a slip lane, and so it kind of makes you actually have to stop and assess the situation before moving forward. I won't sway anyone with telling you which one I prefer, but the survey is up through the 7th, so.
Ben?
I'll also note that this is a temporary improvement that we're looking to make. This is a safety problem that we've all known has been an issue, but we've all kind of been curious how to solve it, and we want to test some different options of what we can do before we have to go in a more expensive concrete kind of project. So we'll be putting this on the ground, whichever version of it gets approved by council later in April or early May. We'll be putting it down on the ground over the summer for 60 to 90 days. And based on what we get from feedback from the community after that, we'll maybe be able to make some more decisions about grant applications and plans that we want to make for that corridor going forward.
Very nice. If there is no one else, I'm gonna add, the second item on the Move Safely Blue Ridge is the draft safety action plan development. The team has been meeting with each locality in the region in one-on-one meetings to review and discuss existing condition reports, and discussions covered safety criteria, potential solutions, implementation, demographics, to ensure that the plan that's being developed align with each locality's needs. So we've met so far with 4 out of our 6 jurisdictions, and the next 2 are scheduled for later this week and next week, the first week of March. The third item on this list is the roadway safety roundtables with farmers and ranchers in the area, based on feedback that we received from the Safe Street and Road for All January stakeholder meeting. We've invited a select group of farmers and ranchers in this area to discuss roadway safety concerns and solutions. And as of tomorrow, the team is hosting a meeting in person with the Virginia Farmers Bureau. This meeting will take place from 12:30 to 1:30 p.m. Doors will open at 11:30 at the Virginia Forestry Department here in Charlottesville. So this is an invite-only meeting, so let us know if you'd like to attend or if you know anyone who might be interested in attending. The purpose of this meeting is simply to share experiences, identify key safety concerns, as well as exploring potential solutions to improve roadway safety for farmers and ranchers in this area. And finally, the next policy meeting will be next April on the 23rd at 4 p.m. in this very room. Thank you.
Right. Any other questions, comments? All right, we have Lucinda, you're gonna give us on the board meeting of CARTA.
Yes. Yeah, so Carter met last week and they had their first board meeting. This is something that the community's been working on for a very long time, so it was a really nice event to happen. They reviewed the draft bylaws and decided on officers. Diantha is going to be the chair and Brian Pinkston is going to be the vice chair. They decided on the meeting times, which they're going to meet. Oh, I'm sorry. Natalie is going to be the vice chair. Sorry, I was hoping someone would correct me if I was wrong, so thank you. Yeah, so they're going to meet every other month, and we're going to move the RTP to meeting every other month as well. So they're going to meet the first Thursday of the month, and their first meeting will be 4th. Thank you. Sorry, I should be more prepared. So yeah, their meeting is going to be at 5 to 6:30, and the RTP meetings are 4 to 6 or 5, yeah, to 6. So RTP is meeting this Thursday and CARTA will meet next month, in March on that fourth Thursday at 5 p.m. I think that's everything that they kind of did in that meeting. The RTP meeting is gonna have somebody, a representative from the Virginia Transit Association come and talk with us a little bit about the state politics and kind of looking at how we can approach the legislature on getting additional funding for transit. So that'll be Thursday night at 4 o'clock.
The next item is this. The dates and meeting schedule, April 23, 4 to 6. Are we moving from the 30th? Is that why that's on here? I don't remember this.
Maybe it's just an update when the next meeting is.
1, 2, 3. So it'd be on the 4th. Yeah, and plus we have a budget date. So I guess that's calling out that that's the one, the next MPO policy board meeting is. And it will be in person. And then we'll go to item number 7. We got updates on projects. I see Sandy approaching the podium.
Yes, and just while we're getting the presentation pulled up, I'll let you all know up front, Chuck was planning to be here tonight to give the presentation. He wasn't able to make it for some family reasons. So for the sake of continuity, I'm largely using the same slides. I added 2 extra ones that won't be in your packet. So I tried to call those out so you can still follow along and it'll be clear which ones skipped. And are you driving or am I from this
You
computer?
can from there.
Awesome.
I
Okay.
don't know how to do that.
Okay. So we wanted to come back to you. The CTV met in January to give us the first glimpse on the staff recommended scenario for projects recommended for funding and smart scale. So what I'm going to do today is just review what was in the staff recommended scenario. I'm going to start by giving a little bit of background on what the cost allocations were for this round because they're different than what they were previous rounds and what that means moving forward. And then we'll talk about the projects in the Culpeper district and how they performed. And of course, for my VDOT friends here in the room, please feel free to jump in if you have additional items you'd like to touch on as we go through this. All right, so to set the stage, I think it's important to understand how funding gets allocated among the different buckets to fund projects through VDOT's budgeting process. The first thing based on the state code that has to be funded is maintenance and operations. And that also includes things like responses to disaster recovery, so things like Hurricane Helene, as well as snow removal, which we all have appreciated the last month, I'm sure. So what has happened in years past is that we have continued to see an increase in the amount of funding that is needed to go toward maintenance funding. And it's only once all of the maintenance obligations are fully accounted for that you move down the budgeting process, and construction funding is based on what is left over after the maintenance funding is distributed. So what we saw, first of all, in the budget that is being prepared, the 6-year budget that is being prepared for fiscal years 26 through 31, is that compared to the previous 6-year estimated allocation, we're seeing a shift from construction back to maintenance of $1.6 billion compared to what it was previously. So that directly impacts the amount of funding that is available to distribute among the 5 construction projects directly. More money goes to maintenance, less money is available for construction. Smart Scale, just to make sure I'm being clear, is a construction program. And the high priority program and the district grant program are 2 different construction programs that use Smart Scale basically to allocate funding among them. The second factor that I want to spend just a minute to review is that we had additional funding that was available in rounds 4 and 5 because of the implementation of a wholesale fuel tax that was put into place in 2020. So what happens, the way that funding is identified to be allocated among smart scale projects is that there is an estimate of how much revenue is going to be generated in years 5 and 6 of VDOT's 6-year improvement program. when there was a new funding source that was that went into effect in 2020, what happened is that this additional revenue started becoming available immediately, and it hadn't been programmed in the 6 years prior. So there was funding, there was this huge infusion of funding that hadn't been allocated yet. And so in order to get back on that 6 year cycle, all of that funding that was coming into the revenue stream immediately had to be allocated to projects. So this new funding was phased in over round 4 and 5. So what you'll see is that in round 4, there was $393 million from this new revenue that was generated. And in round 5, there was $666 million of this new revenue that was generated. Now in round 6, we've caught up, and there's $243 million. So this is funding that is generated through this wholesale fuels tax. The funding that is generated stays within the region, because the Culpeper district doesn't have a special fund like a corridor fund or a transportation authority that was in place when this new tax was implemented. All that funding goes to the district grant program. So the good news is it does create additional revenue that we can use to program for smart scale projects. But compared to what we saw in rounds 4 and 5, we're caught up now. And what we're seeing in round 6 is going to give us a better baseline of how much funding is going to be available moving forward, accounting both for the increased maintenance costs and accounting for fully catching up with the wholesale fuels tax being implemented.
I'll mention, Sandy, Culpeper District is that wholesale fuels tax has really benefited us because the length of Route 29, we were one of the largest. It was one of our largest revenue sources, so compared to the other districts. So part of that is not having a regional authority or a special place that has to go, but we benefited greatly. So we had our pot of supplemental DGP in the past was larger compared to other rural districts.
Because there was a reduction in the income from just this whatever the substitution for the wholesalers was made, as opposed to everybody, paying a decent amount at the pump. So I'm surprised it turned out.
Yeah, and we can see exactly what Stacey is referring to in this table right here. So this shows how much funding was allocated. So this isn't necessarily how much was available within the District 2 program, but how much was actually applied to go towards projects that were funded in each of the different rounds. Of course, with round 6 being that it's not approved for funding yet, this is recommended at this point. So rounds 1 and 2 were kind of phasing in smart scale. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time looking at those. Round 3 gives us a good indication, though, of how much funding was available before the implementation of this wholesale fuels tax once smart scale moved to a biennial application cycle. And then round 6 gives us a good indication of how much funding is likely to be available moving forward. So it does more than double the amount of funding that was available in round 3 with those changes. But you also see in rounds 4 and 5, there are just these huge spikes of funding, which contributed to having a lot of projects that were funded in the Culpeper district. But now we're leveled out and we're not going to see those funding amounts moving forward. The other thing I just want to make sure that I clarify for you all is that I included how much funding we were able to receive into the Culpeper district through the high priority program in each round. But we are not guaranteed to get any projects funded through the high priority program. These are competitive statewide. So it speaks to the success that our district has had in being able to develop projects that have been competitive, and we've been able to pull in these statewide resources, but we can't count on them necessarily from one round to the next. All right, this table shows sort of the overall picture of what the smart scale funding allocations look like. So a couple of things that I want to note. If you look at this chart in the Culpeper district under the DGP, the district grant program available, you'll see that $68 million potentially available to allocate. And then in the column next, there's a chart of probably a dozen or so projects. And
Okay.
Let's make sure. Sean, can you give us an indication you can hear us? We just went offline. If you're listening.
Yeah, we just got a chat.
Yeah.
Thank
back.
you.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you, Jason.
Good job.
All right, so we covered the 6.6 million, anything that isn't allocated, but it remains in the pot, stays with the district grant program. I want to point out two additional things. One is that the total amount available through the high priority program that's around was just under $385 million. And then a total of either 53 or 54. I just came from another meeting where they kept saying 54. So it's one of those two numbers, projects statewide were recommended for funding. But this was what was presented at the CTB meeting in January, and there might be a minor revision that hasn't been communicated yet. Yeah.
So we had in our district, there was 68 million available. 6.6 went to finish previous projects, but only 57 ended up being allocated. So still remaining, we had 4.3.
Correct.
Was there anything that got?
It couldn't have funded another project. There was nothing else.
There was nothing we missed out on because we had the 6.6 and the 4.3. They didn't have.
It wouldn't have made any difference.
You knew my question before you even articulated. Okay,
Yeah.
Thank you.
So 53 or 54 projects funded statewide. So this is a lower amount than we have seen, or a lower number of projects than we have seen in previous rounds. And that's probably a combination of projects are more expensive, but because there were bigger projects, and also just because projects have gotten more expensive. And also the reduction in funding from rounds 4 and 5 all contributed to that. And then at the bottom, you will see what was funded in the Culpeper district. So we have 4 projects that have been recommended for funding at this point. 3 of those through the district grant program. We're all in the northern part of the district. And then we have the one Pantops project at the Peter Jefferson Parkway and Rolka Road 250 intersection that were recommended for funding through the high priority programs.
Was that that choice based upon dollars, and the cheaper one, which is the highest traffic one, or something like that? I'm just disappointed that the 54 is really important thing to not get any recognition.
But that's not, let's look at the cost. I mean.
When you see the daily backup there, you really wonder. But
Yeah, I mean, remember, Smart Scale is a comparison between the benefits that it scores based on the Smart Scale criteria and the cost. So so the Barracks Road projects and the 64 projects did see really good benefit scores, but they were also expensive projects. So that is something that we want to consider moving forward, and I'll talk a little bit about some strategies that maybe we can consider for future rounds. But that basically was what I wanted to cover on that slide. So just a couple of initial scoring observations based on taking an initial look at the information. We had 24 projects recommended in the Culpeper district compared to 53 of 270 projects that were recommended statewide. The changes to the land use scoring methodology did contribute to lower scores overall for projects. They still provided scoring benefits. I just want to iterate that this was intentional, because what they saw statewide previously is that land use was a single factor that had a disproportionate impact on determining which projects were going to be successful. The changes in the economic development scoring methodology resulted in slightly lower scores in urbanized areas. The changes to how high priority funding steps were funded, that did not impact our area. But the changes to what was eligible to be submitted through the high priority program did reduce the number of eligible applications that could be submitted, and also increase the average cost pretty significantly of our high priority project applications.
And I think it's good for this group to understand too. So 4 out of 24 projects were recommended to be funded here in Culpeper District. We spent a little over $1 million developing with the localities, MPO, developing applications. Over $1 million developing applications, 24 applications, and only 4 were funded. And that's not including the amount of money that was spent on the pipeline.
That's right.
So the pipeline studies, there's additional money.
That was simply our staff time and consultant time separate of those studies.
So we see how much money is gonna be available for smart scale. So as a region, we really need to come together to determine what are the projects we want to invest in to make sure that, one, you've got a good application, and then maybe some of the strategies Sandy's gonna talk about is you're gonna have to buy down the cost of the project in order for them to be successfully funded. Based on where we're at right now and the big ticket projects that are looming out there that it seems like everybody is coalesced around, that something needs to happen, like at Fifth Street. You're not getting a $90 million project in this region without any supplemental funding or funding from the localities to buy it down. It's not gonna happen.
Before we get to that, just want to show you overall that this just shows a chart of the median score for the Culpeper district compared to the statewide. So overall, the Culpeper district is performing better than the statewide averages, and we can look at it a little bit more on this page. The median and average scores for the Culpeper district exceeded the statewide medians and average scores. We had almost 30% of our projects scored in the top 25%, and all of our projects were in the top 65%. So overall, as a district, we performed really well. But I do want to point out that if you look at the scores specifically for the MPO, those are a little bit lower. So a couple of things that I think are helpful to keep in mind is that the highest cost project that was recommended for funding through the high priority program was just under $46 million. So that probably gives us a good indicator of the scale of the projects that we need to be developing and submitting through the Smart Scale program, and be really thoughtful and strategic about how we are scoping our projects in order to fall within that threshold. I think.
Do you know if that was the total cost or was that just the cost that they were asking for?
That's what I was gonna ask.
I think for this project, it was the total cost. They asked for the full amount, but I'll go back to confirm that. And if I recall correctly, that average cost of projects that were funded in the high priority program was closer to about $30 or $32 million. So 46 was high, and the average was around 30 or 32. I just came back from a meeting with the Smart Scale team across the state, and one thing that they really emphasized is even if you're talking about leveraging funding, the most important aspect is how much money you are actually asking for through the project. So even if you are submitting a $79 million project application, you have to buy down the cost enough that you're really only asking for something like $30 or $35 million. The amount that you're asking for is going to have a bigger impact than the additional benefits you'll get from a bigger project. And I don't want this to be discouraging. I think this is more information. There was a lot. there were a lot of changes this round. That
changes every year. That's the
well, but that
Yeah.
significantly. But we have better information now to know what to expect moving forward.
Can I ask another question? Oh, I'm sorry.
no,
Go
please, you
ahead. No,
go.
go ahead. Okay. Is Smart Scale still a relative score? So it also depends on whatever else is in the mix, like that year too.
Yeah.
You know, so if there's a project that's just off the charts in its benefits, and you know, you might just miss out that year because that project just scored so well, you know.
Yeah, that is correct. Did you have another question?
Yes, can you remind me, I know you told us about this when you first presented the changes,
Mhm.
but who drives the changes to the Smart Scale application process?
So the process of evaluating the changes is done by the Office of Intermodal Planning and Investment staff. The decision about what changes get made are, and that's under the guidance of the secretary who reports to the governor, of course. But the actual process is approved and determined by the Commonwealth Transportation Board.
Okay, how much leverage, power, thumb on scale pressing does the governor have?
What was the question?
How much power does the governor have to influence the Smart Scale scoring process?
As in to change it from what it is?
Yeah, like ask for it to be changed for X reasons.
Well, you know
I
how
would
they,
imagine that would be an administration. If the administration wanted to review smart scale, which I believe that the changes that happened just now was because the legislator asked us to review it. And they wanted changes made, and that's what happened. So I mean, they're constantly reviewing the process, but I would imagine that during the next administration, because this governor, this is his last year. I would imagine that there will be a new administration, they will take a look at smart scale and potentially make changes again.
Yeah, that was kind of what I was getting at, was like how,
But some of
what
the
can we
stuff is,
anticipate from a different administration with maybe a different.
but there's
ethos?
things that are specifically in the code. That's codified through the Code of Virginia for smart scale that the General Assembly will have to change in order for the factors.
Yeah.
So there's some leeway that the CTV has, and I guess the administration has through the CTV to make changes, but a whole lot of it isn't, it's codified.
So is our funding formula. So DGP and HPP are percentages of an overall formula that also includes safety and some other things, state of good repair, and that's in the code as well. And that can be adjusted as well.
Yeah, and but is the scoring, that's not a General Assembly thing.
The methodology, but the General Assembly, the code requires what has to be considered. It doesn't necessarily account for how the measurements are made.
Okay.
That's a policy decision that is made by the CTV.
Okay.
And they go through the process. Anytime there are changes of that being presented at the CTV, there's the opportunity for localities, MPOs, PDCs, any average citizen to make comments, and that's all factored into the decision making.
Okay, thank you.
So talking about what it looks like to get the projects like funded. Right now there is a staff recommended funding scenario. This is based on the project scores. In the spring, there will be public hearings on the 6-year improvement program. This also includes what is going to potentially be funded through Smart Scale. At the May Commonwealth Transportation Board, will present what is considered a consensus funding scenario, meaning the CTB could make revisions for what was recommended based on the staff scenario. And then in June, the 6-year improvement program for the following 6-year program will be adopted, which will include funding for the smart scale projects. So talking about what is going to happen for round 7, and this is where maybe I can be a little bit more optimistic because we have better information now, and we do have some opportunities to go back and review some of the projects that were submitted, like the I-64 DDI, to do some value engineering and try to right size the scale of that project. We have 5 studies that are currently slated for the MPO area. We've talked about these previously. The ones that are in the blue shades are the STAR studies. So that's the US 29 corridor between Hydraulic and Woodbrook, and the 29 interchange at Emmett Street. And then we have one in the city at the Ridge McIntyre West Main intersection. And then the project pipeline studies will kick off once the Commonwealth Transportation Board authorizes funding for those in March. And so one of the things we're doing is we're going to go back and do some value engineering at the DDI on 5th Street and develop a concept that will be scaled better to fit with the information we have now about what is going to be viable in smart scale. And then we will also be looking at US 29 at the I-64 118 interchange. So are there any additional questions that weren't raised previously?
We'll go back, please. So,
How far?
the very last slide.
Okay.
The stars and project pipeline studies we're going to discuss in a minute.
This is really the update. We don't really have significant updates on these other than we're currently getting ready. I guess the biggest update is that we're developing a draft survey for the STAR study in the city. So hopefully that will be released here in the next few weeks, and we'll start getting some public input on what the needs are at that intersection.
If there's information you can easily put your hands on about the 29, the teal, the light blue thing, I'm drawing a total blank on what that's all about.
Yeah,
Because it's a pipeline.
yeah,
We just had 29 Solutions work and got all this sidewalks that come in, so I just wondered what that focus was.
yeah, this is south, so there's that, we removed the loop ramp to make that, do you remember with Fontaine, we're working on removing the left turn.
It's the same
I
from
thought that was
Fontaine.
29 north.
That's from Fontaine going.
Oh, never mind, okay.
Yeah.
I thought that was north of the city and this, now I see it's Fontaine, okay. Because I thought the one down with the green one was. Okay. No.
The stars,
Stars.
29,
The Emmett Street interchange.
That's right, yeah.
the Woodbrook and
Something
what's
was
the
there,
one?
somebody or other, I mean,
Hydraulic to Woodbrook.
Hydraulic to Woodbrook.
yeah, it says US 29.
Yes.
Where, is that already done? Is it underway? Is it about to begin? I mean,
No, we're about to begin it.
and
So,
is
so,
that requested by the localities or where did that come from?
well, there are several high safety needs. It's one of the highest safety needs along that corridor. We have several PSI locations, potential for safety improvement locations along that corridor. So we're not going to revisit any of the improvements that have already been recommended and funded. We're really looking at the corridor to look at other operations and other opportunities to improve safety. Sorry for the confusion.
All right, any other questions or?
Yes, I have a question. Looks like the Barracks Road pipeline corridor improvements, like that scored the highest, even though it was the most expensive. Is there any planning to look into other funding sources for that since it scored so high?
I don't think on the VDOT side there is. Of course, the study is developed.
Come up with 60 million. In the city, what you'll come up with, what, how much was that total project? 130?
30.
Yeah,
So we'll come up with 60, you come up with 70, and we'll call it a day.
We'll build a mid.
there was an alternative improvement that was identified that we could discuss if there was interest in pursuing that.
That was sidewalk element.
No, it was basically instead of doing the two roundabouts, it was adding a second right turn onto
The bypass side.
the bypass south, yeah, and we'd be able to construct the shared use path up to that interchange, but without the roundabout, we wouldn't be able to reduce the lanes under the bridge, so we wouldn't be able to continue the shared use path between the two interchanges there.
And sidewalks on the north end of the road already, so that's.
I believe that's correct.
Right next to the mill.
Yeah.
It's the sidewalk.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we can have that discussion though.
Any other questions or comments? I want to move on before I make all my comments.
I'll be available after the meeting. Thank you all.
We're at our roundtable updates. I'll just go right over, we'll do start Charlottesville, any updates on?
Sure, we're working through identifying urgent transportation improvements, so there's spot improvements in places we want to do traffic calming testing. We've been working on those for the past couple months and are still trying to narrow down exactly what spots we want to tackle, but we're getting closer with that. The other big fun update that we have is our e-bike voucher program. We did our lottery for that on February 5th and have been handing out $1,000 vouchers to 25 lucky people. There's still about people who haven't claimed their vouchers yet, but of the 25 who have shown up, it has really changed the vibe in the MDS permit desk. Most people come in thinking through all the issues that they're going to have to work through to get a building permit, but we now have people showing up at MDS saying, I'd like my $1,000, please, and they're very giddy and happy to run off and buy their new bike. So we'll be doing another round of signups for our lottery in April, and then doing the lottery itself at the beginning of May, which will be beginning of bike month and doing lots of things in bike month as well. So looking forward to doing.
Sweet. Albemarle?
The county staff are really looking forward to the mobility summit next week and to share some of our next steps for the 3-Knot Trail Shared Use Path master planning process. Our staff are also working with the city to plan for Bike Month and continuing to work on the transportation chapter of the Albemarle County Common.
Ms. Bentley, anything from CTAC? Mr. Etsby online, do you have updates from John?
I do. Hold on. Let me, yeah. Just, want to report, some of you are familiar with it because maybe you participated in it, but we had a board retreat, just news from our organization to help identify priorities for, the next 12 months or year for, Mike Murphy, who, is our CEO. Those include, software upgrades, demonstrating microtransit and green and ADA, working closely with CAT on ADA agreements, and then, oh, I can't remember. There's like 5 or 6. I think I got the most ones. But there's ones like, internal ones, like set up performance evaluation at Jaunt, which hasn't been around for a long time. So yeah, just some internal good direction from our board on priorities ahead for us to work on. We've applied to some of those DRPT. There was an application period for grants that was due February 1st. And we put in for demonstration. We put in for a bunch of things, but we put in for a demonstration pilot for micro transit, as well as for software procurement for scheduling and dispatch. So bring us into the current decade. We're a couple decades behind on that. So that's all I got, and take care.
Thank you, Jason. Is there Vita, any other updates from Vita?
Couple things. This is all really locality oriented. The revenue sharing and transportation alternatives pre-application cycle opens on April 1st. And to prepare for that, applicants can participate in 2 upcoming webinars. There's one on March 5th, next Wednesday, on revenue sharing, and on the 19th of March for the TA program. Those are both virtual. There is also an opportunity. We look forward to welcoming our locality partners at Locality Day on April 24th. This is an in-person event. It's at Silver Fox Lavender Farm in Nelson County. We have done a Locality Day a few times in Culpeper District, and this one is actually combined with Lynchburg and Stanton District. So there'll be VDOT staff from all the 3 districts, as well as from the localities in those districts. There's good information sharing, I think, in the presentations, and some networking opportunities to learn from other localities on what they're doing, what's working, and what they have up their sleeve. And then finally, Sandy mentioned our spring public hearing for the 6-year program. That is going to be on May 7th, and we'll be back in Culpeper. We were in the spring last year, but back in Culpeper this year.
Guys, you all seen the work that's going on out on 29, they're hydraulic with the pedestrian bridge. So that project is hoping to be complete in October of this year. They should start beam erection sometime in April on the things that are coming along. And we did have a request from Sam Sanders from the city to look at putting the insignias for the county, the university, and the city on the bridge, on the fence. So essentially we have the county seal, university, and the city on the fence as you're on either side. So we're trying to work through that. Guess it's kind of a gesture of you coming into that region all together. So I thought that was a good thing. So we're working with our design builder to try to make sure that can happen. Other update is Fontaine and the District Avenue design build bundle. That'll be the next one. So we're hoping to get a public hearing for that sometime in May. The request for proposals will go out in June. Hopefully we'll have an award by the CTB in December of this year and start work next year with the project being complete sometime in 2029. So got lots of work in the pipeline.
Any questions for Awesome. Did I miss anyone?
When you said the Fontaine intersection, it's still
Oh, well, we
alive.
talked
It's
about
still
it for a whole
alive.
year.
But so it is still alive. I thought it had died. So it's still alive as far as the most recent design.
That and the city's project. We've taken the city's project we're doing that with, that's the Fontaine interchange project. Yeah, so all of it will be done at one time.
Are there any additional matters from the public? Online or in person? Seeing none. Then our next meeting, as it was stated earlier, April 23rd, 2024. And with that, good meeting, everyone. Thank you, everyone. The meeting is adjourned. So